This episode brought to you by Audible.com. For your free 30-day trial and a free audiobook, go to audibletrial.com/zombiepopcorn. Again, that's audibletrial.com/zombiepopcorn.
Hey everybody, welcome to the show. This is episode 3 of Coalesce. With me always, all the way across the table.
Making a reference.
Making a reference to another zombie popcorn show is Jason.
Hello, how are you?
And today, we're not quite sure what we're going to call the show, but we do know we are going to cover a lot of the angry, passionate hate mail we got from both the Christian and atheist community regarding last week's show, which is kind of sad because Beth is one of the sweetest people I've ever met. Yeah, it wasn't directed at her necessarily, but there were some ideas that were discussed that we want to.
People are definitely on both sides passionate about the topic of poverty. Mm-hmm. And I had no idea until we did that show. I mean, I guess what we should do is just kind of talk about what was said to us, the comments, and kind of break it down and just go about there. Yeah.
Which, just to clarify again, you know, our mission for the show, it's to get people from different backgrounds to come together and find various dialogue points and common areas of action where we can help to alleviate human suffering in the world, but we're mainly focused on the area of human trafficking. And so our conversation about poverty was mainly in the area of dealing with poverty as it relates to trafficking. So I do want to set that down as the premise for what we talk about going forward as we clarify last week's show. So what were some of the comments that struck you from last week?
Well, I think the comment that struck me the hardest was one that you said that you received from some friends, I guess it was. I don't know if they were friends or just acquaintances.
No, they are very good friends.
And because I think the reason it hit me so hard, what the comment was, and I'm only paraphrasing because I don't have the full thing, but in the essence of it was that if you lead them to Christ, everything will get better. And I have a problem with that, not because I'm atheist and whatever. It's not that. It just seems like it's such a non-action. It doesn't seem like that does anything. That doesn't help anybody. And it definitely one of the writers, one of the comments that we got that I got brought up a great point because we did talk about praying and talking about bringing people towards God, and they brought up a good question or a good comment. Saying, what about people of Latin America that are being held in bondage, that are suffering, and that are being taken advantage of, that are already sharing the same faith, that are already on board with that, and they're already trying to become better people, and they are still being oppressed and still being held in bondage and still being trafficked, and they have your God.
Well, and I think my only response to that, and I think the point that could be made, I think first, when it comes to the idea of personal conversion and how that helps, I just did air quotes, you can't see that, helps. I think there's a difference between maybe more of a docile, cultural Roman Catholic faith that is predominant in South and Central America, and much more of an actively engaged evangelical. And actually, one of the largest movements in South and Central America is Pentecostalism. And in some countries, it's set to actually overtake Catholicism, which, you know, I think when a faith is much more personally engaging and focuses on personal transformation versus being brought into the institution, Roman Catholicism is all about bringing people, at least at the popular level, is about bringing people into the institution of the right church to partake of the sacraments. From my end, coming from more of a Protestant view, I think it's much more important to engage the aspect of personal conversion and actually call person to personal change, whether that means things like having a sense of moral courage, a sense of stewardship with their life, and those things are focused on, and not just the sacraments, although that I don't want to reduce Catholicism to less than some of the good things that it can be. So in that sense, I do think, and I can even see it in the lives of people I know who, because of their personal conversion experience, their lives are bettered, at least on the personal, microcosmic level. So I think if you can add to that passion a sense of social consciousness about social needs, I think you can create something that's very dynamic, very powerful. But in the sense of conversion being able to transform people's individual lives, I think it's possible, but it's not a systemic change to society. It's more of the person's self-improvement. So,
but really, who cares? Who cares if the person who is being held against their will for whatever level of human trafficking we were talking about, and they are a believer in God, they are a follower of Christ, they could have the best outlook of what they may become in the afterlife, or whatever their church, or whatever their doctrine tells them that they will achieve. It still doesn't change the fact that they're being raped, that they're being chained, that they're being beaten, that they're being forced to do things that we would not wish on our worst enemies. And that's where I get hung up on it, and where it kind of upsets me. Is like, yes, it's great to live in privileged society and talk about how wonderful it will be if we find this spiritual conversion, and how we can become greater people if we have this spiritual conversion, or if we have this knowledge or this enlightenment, or whatever stamp you want to put on it. But it's different when it's somebody who's being beaten, tortured, raped, chained. It doesn't make any difference in philosophy. It's not going to change them. It's not going to make their oppressors look at them and go, "Oh, that's a good Christian. We should let him go." And
yeah. No, I agree. And that's where, I mean, number one, I don't want to reduce personal conversion to a purely Western, first world.
And I wasn't doing that either. I'm just, I only can speak of to what I know and what the world that I know.
I think personally, I mean, from friends I know who've lived in Africa and in places like Honduras, like in terms of reaching out to individual people, converting an alcoholic who beats his wife, or a man with anger management issues who beats his wife, or anyone who mistreats their family or whatever, to see a person like that convert to the point in any culture where they're no longer doing that, and they become a much more of a gentle person out of a personal conversion experience at the microcosmic level. I think that's important, whether you're talking Africa, Honduras, or America, or the U.S.
Yeah.
Now, what I would probably add to that again is, that's part of the problem I see in evangelicalism, is like, but it doesn't have to just be, it's like you've received something, you've received a sense of passionate faith that compels you to action. Social justice causes, helping the poor, etc., the oppressed, the trafficked, and so forth. That needs to be as active a part of your faith as your own personal spiritual disciplines. Like, it needs to be integrated into the whole of your life and become a lifestyle that's lived. And unfortunately, we in the evangelical community tend not to think on that kind of systemic level. We keep it to that personal one-on-one, help, talk to your neighbor, help your neighbor, whatever. But it stays in this realm of proselytization, and it stays in this realm of personal self-improvement, and it doesn't engage the social causes and systemic problems like it should. Which is part of my frustration with it.
I see what you're saying, but I think where people will, with this episode and last episode, is like, we preference the show saying we're talking about human trafficking, and then you make a comparison of personal better, and becoming a better person, but you make the reference of somebody beating their wife, or beating their children, or just being abusive. Mm-hmm. That's different than somebody being abused. It's like, let's take the abusive, like the analogy you use, the abusive husband beating their wife.
Right.
The husband, great if they find Christ and it changes their life where they no longer put a harmful hand on their wife or their loved one. Great, but and I can see where people are saying that yes, finding Christ and finding this purpose will help them get out of this aggressive towards others mentality, because you there's that peace philosophy that's in with Christianity and with religions in general. But the way it applies to trafficking is if the husband is beating the wife, and I don't know why we always use the husband and wife, but we're using it in this situation. If in the same situation the wife finds Christ, it's not going to stop the husband. It's not going to stop the slave trader. It's not going to stop that. Sure, they may be able to find strength in some teachings or philosophy that help them get through the day, but it doesn't stop the. And I know you were speaking to that too. That with evangelicals, it needs to be further than that. It needs to be further than the husband, and needs to be further than the abuser. But I think that's where a lot of the anger of the. It's not really anger. I think it's just people reaching out, trying to clarify. But with the comments and emails that we received, it was because people are not putting that separation. That they're looking at trafficking the same way as they're looking at the husband beating the wife, and the husband becoming a better person when finding a better philosophy of life. And that just doesn't work when it comes to trafficking. And
so we can't wait for personal conversion for people to stop oppressing others. We need to free the oppressed now.
Yeah,
that's the point you're making. Yeah, no, totally agree. And I think there's a call even, and unfortunately, I mean, the way the evangelical mindset works, saying that something is, I know it's, like you said in the first and second episode, I don't need to have God tell me something's right in order to know it's probably right. But it does help to be able to say, like, because Christians can be very reductionistic and think, well, if it doesn't say it, I don't have to do it. Like, it says I have to tithe, but I don't have to give more than my tithe. Because if I give more than my tithe, then, I don't have to, because I just have to. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's like you're very reductionistic in that when you think that way. And the point of even the New Testament is like, no, it's not about what you can least get away with. It's what's the most you can do. How can you give and then die and keep giving? And so in this case, the issue of, for me to say something like, look, Isaiah 1:16-17, Isaiah 58, like, you know what I want you to do? I want you to go out and free people who are oppressed. I want you to proactively engage with it. I want you to do it and go out there and do it. That's a part of the Christian life.
But is it really? And I'm asking that because you say it is because it's written in Isaiah and that's the philosophy that is taught. But is it really part of Christian life?
It needs to be. If like that part of the story of God's people needs to be recaptured and put into the ethos of evangelicalism. I think it's been a part of Catholicism at certain points with the Catholic charity branches. The only problem is it's been also mixed with this kind of nation state of the church thing, and the politics has got. It's just that's bad. But in terms of like how Catholics have engaged historically with hospital schools,
it's like you think of you can go grab anybody on the street and say name one religious activist group, and they're going to say the Catholic workers. That's the most prominent out of, and not everybody who's a part of that is Catholic, but yeah. They are the most prominent activists. I don't know what that means in terms of what they're doing for this situation. I have not looked into it, but I guess what I'm going at is that philosophy that you're speaking of now. Is that what they're doing with the Catholic workers, or of where, like what you said in Isaiah, where
I can't speak for the Catholic workers personally.
I didn't know if you just knew any.
Yeah, no. I can speak for organizations like IJM because those are the groups that are really that I'm most engaged with. And again, a lot of why Christians disengage from the social activist aspect of what I think is a part of their faith is because, again, it's a post-Reformation thing. It became all about the preached message and personal conversion, not being a part of the institution, and so that's kind of it became all about the preached word, the preached word, the preached word. And Rick Warren made a comment, who's actually become a huge advocate for AIDS relief in the world. I think most of his purpose-driven life sales have gone to fighting AIDS. I think he gives away like 90% of the proceeds or something. Like, that would be an example of someone who's actually putting their money where their mouth is. And he made the comment that, if the last Reformation was about creeds, then this Reformation is about deeds. Like, I think there is something happening in evangelicalism that's pushing it towards social engagement. And I think it's happening more and more. I think it's just you don't hear about it as much because evangelicals are becoming, I don't want to say a ghettoized group, but they're falling into their own subculture. That's probably a better way of putting it.
But don't you think that's the area that they should become more vocal about it? I mean, because when we think of evangelical, for some reason, it's always lumped in with fundamentalism. Yeah. It's always lumped into,
and there's a distinction.
It's always lumped into like Pat Robertson, Jerry Falwell, and then that is lumped into they're just on TV trying to take your money. They're not doing anything. They're scamming people. I mean, across the board of thinking that. And if you're saying that now they're falling more to not being broadcasting more, putting it out there, don't you think when they're actually in the trenches helping people, that's when they should be broadcasting it, and not on TV saying, like Gene Scott sitting there smoking a cigar saying, I'm not going to talk until we reach X amount of dollars. Not saying that they all do that, but just using an extreme situation to highlight a point. But
well, and unfortunately, I mean, the case of I want to deal with the 700 Club. I'm not going to do it because
I try to stay away from.
No, I appreciate it. No, I think with that, I mean, there is that aspect too of like sometimes like pop media tends to focus on whoever has the loudest megaphone, whoever's the most extreme and radical. So you don't hear about the Donald Millers praying at the Democratic National Convention as much as you hear about Rick Warren and his anti-gay views praying at the Republican National Convention. But then likewise, you don't hear about the fact that Rick Warren is helping with AIDS relief in Africa. I mean, it all depends on what makes the better buzz news story. Now, in terms of like organizations that are actually doing it, I mean, things like IJM and things like Compassion and World Vision, like orgs that are out there doing it and engaging people, or even at Catalyst a few years ago when I went to this huge conference in Georgia. Their whole focus was on social justice, and so they talked about everything. They had Jennifer Jackley from Kiva there. They had Malcolm Gladwell was there too, but he didn't talk about justice. He was just on my leadership. But who else was there? The Kiva people and so forth. So you had all these people who were engaged with it. It's just not in the and it's known maybe in parts of the subculture, but you have to go into the subculture to kind of see what's happening in that subculture. Otherwise, all you see is the outside of the subculture. So that could be why. I mean, it's just who has the loudest voice. I
don't know, but how many people are actually engaged? I know these groups have large dollars and do big works that way. But how many of the flock are actually engaged in it? Is it more donations from people? Is it more prayer? Is it more just like sign this petition type thing? Or are people actually in the trenches and doing more to engage, to educate, to push it? Because, I mean, we do live in the heart, right? I mean, I grew up in Texas, living in the heart of that bubble. And here in Virginia, we have another bubble of Christian funding and focusing. But you don't hear it. You don't see it on the street. You don't, which is probably good in some aspects. But
let your works be hid.
Huh?
Let your works be hidden and all that.
Yeah.
I think in terms of that, in terms of who's doing the most of it, it's going to be probably more left-leaning adult Christians. It's going to be the more college-educated Christian crowd. It's going to be a lot of younger evangelicals are going to do it more than maybe certain older, more rural ones. And even in all fairness, excuse me, to a lot of the rural Christians, I've been in a lot of, I grew up more of a country suburban setting, so a lot of the people I knew are kind of in a different socio-economic status or whatever, and even they will volunteer their free time and help a neighbor and help an old lady down the street, like they engage at that microcosmic level, but they just don't have a very strong global sensibility, and that's probably because they're very nationalistic at times. But I mean, a lot of them are sweet and decent people.
But nobody's saying that if you're not helping on a global scale, you're not a nice person. It's just, especially when it comes to religion, especially when it comes to a philosophy based on a utopia. It needs to be more than helping old ladies across the street. It needs to be that, and I'm not saying that. I mean, I include religion on that, but that is also for every anarchist out there. That's for every political activist, because if that's your philosophy, it needs to be more engaged. It needs to be more.
Well, and that's why you have movements to push those things. Like I'm trying. I know other people who are trying. I know things like 58 and Compassion, and I know they all try.
Yeah.
It's just that you still just have people who are set in their ways, and in their own ways are very nominally Christian. That, or they are still products of their time and history, like we talked on the first episode of, all that historically has preceded the modern evangelical movement still affects the ethos and mindset of that movement. And so it's a matter of changing the mindset, because like you said, the church has a lot of potential to be good and engaged with the world. It's just hard when they withdraw. Now, again, every conference I've gone to in the past, whether it's the Willow Creek Leadership Summit, Catalyst, Exponential, like all these large church planting, church leadership conferences, they're all very big on social engagement.
Let me tell you something about conferences. I don't go to conferences. There's so many conferences within, interests that I'm engaged in. Conferences paint a false picture. Conferences paint a beautiful picture that everything is coming together and everybody's working for the same goal and everybody's doing all these wonderful works. And they are. The people there are doing great works, but it's misleading, especially for a newcomer coming in. It's a good place to go if you don't know who to attach to learn different philosophy, but to judge the works of what's going on by what you see at a conference is, I find, would be very misleading.
And I say that only to say that it's engaging it's awakening the social consciousness of the evangelical community. Not, I can't speak to who's doing. Well, I know who's doing the best. Things like IJM and Compassion are doing really well. I mean, honestly, even Operation Blessing over at CBN is doing well. I mean, these things are all they're all doing well. They just don't get the credit.
Well, I guess that's the next question that you or the comment that you got was, I think it was the same people, maybe it was different, saying that they don't support big orgs, and it has to be grassroots. Let's talk about that for a minute. Tell us the comment that was made, and then let's. Because I think
the idea was that Americans are lazy and want to throw money at an organization and not
correction, not Americans.
That was the comment. But yeah, Europeans, Russians, the people in China.
But there's 3 Americans, North, Central, and South.
Oh, right. Sorry. Sorry, I was speaking in shorthand. I gotta stop speaking in that accent because, number one, it's a bad accent, and number two, someone's gonna get pissed.
I think people are already pissed. That's why we're having this episode.
Yeah, exactly. Man, I don't care about that stuff. They're talking about the poor, but they just made fun of my accent.
They do it. I'm being from Texas. I'm going about it. Anyway, go ahead.
That people in the U.S. and the Western world are lazy. Better, yeah.
It was good.
Are lazy because they'd rather throw money at a big org than help in their own community. So their view, it seemed at times, it felt like, and this person who I was talking with, who's a really good friend, But nevertheless, it was a little bit of a verbal sparring thing, and it was. Anyway, their point was that they want to petition, which does nothing, which we'll talk about that later, I'm sure too. They want to throw money at a big org, which instead of helping out in their own community, and the org doesn't do anything because it has so much overhead, so it's a waste. It's bad stewardship, and they aren't engaging in their own community, which I guess the implication is let the nationals of the different countries deal with their own communities and have no outside help. I don't know if that's the logical implication of what she said, but definitely the part about not helping out in your own community, which is true. People don't. But that was the gist of the conversation, that people just want to be lazy and throw money at things. And the big orgs have too much overhead.
So the big orgs have too much overhead, so giving them money doesn't effectively address the issue. People need to focus in their backyard more than what's going on globally. That's the essence of what was said,
I think, and I don't want to misrepresent.
Well, you wouldn't be if this is how you perceived it during the conversation and how you view it now. It wouldn't be. I mean, that's how you see it, and if that's not what she says, she's welcome to respond to us again. And then we'll address that. But from what we understand now, those are the things. So I guess instead of me jumping into it, tell me what you feel about that. Why is she right or why is she wrong? And how does that fit into human trafficking?
Well, in terms of, let's deal with the whole backyard versus the global situation. I understand that we live in a post-colonialist world and that there have been way too many times people from the Western world who want to help non-Western countries or non-first world countries, whatever the PC term is for describing people who have more than enough and people who seem to be in positions of vulnerability worldwide, or a lack of development perhaps would be a better way, or lack of infrastructure. I understand that it can be this element of like the great white hope coming in and giving handouts and charity and telling everyone how to do everything and being ignorant of the expertise of the locals navigating their own culture. Fine. Absolutely. There's a book out called When Helping Hurts, toxic charity, when how you choose to help can affect things. And do people make mistakes in trying to help and not do everything right? Yes. Do I always do everything right in my own life at the micro level in terms of making sure I always do what'll help me perfectly? No. Do I sometimes hurt myself by poor choices? Yes. I think start somewhere and engage. The thing that really ticked me off about the Coney situation was even if people felt like what's-his-face from Invisible Children wasn't handling it right or had certain methods that were off, the fact that his whole character came under scrutiny because organizations cost money and he might have been a little misguided, the fact that and I think he had a psychotic break, and honestly I can't say that I can't relate to him because it's just like you try to do something good and it's one thing to say, hey man, look, you could have done this better, you could have whatever, but people really went after his character for it. And it's like, really, just because he was a little misguided, whatever, probably needed a mentor who was smarter than him from a third world country to say, you should be careful about this. Like, literally people lambasted him for it. And I think when we don't take into account that everyone who engages in social justice causes is going to get it wrong, whether at the beginning of their time as an activist, the middle, or the end, one. And then two, when we talk about big orgs and money that goes there, you're not going to have this idealistic rosy world of pure grassroots, pure personal conversion, pure whatever. It's not going to happen. Like, the big orgs are here, they're part of it, they're part of the world we live in. This isn't the world we want, it's the world we have, and this is what's here to work with. And they're doing things that, honestly, I don't have a law degree. I can't go and prosecute pimps and johns in third world countries who are exploiting women for human and men for for sexual trafficking. I can't do that. You know what? I need an org, and I'm sorry that they have to pay for jet fuel to get people back and forth. Sorry. But you can't tell me that, like, that's doing more harm than good because people have to pay for overhead to live in the world and work and do what they do. those are some of my thoughts.
Yeah, and I think you brought up a very you touched on a very interesting point that I want to kind of highlight. It's like it is very important, and Lauren from Food Empowerment Project is very focused in on this as well with what she does with her work. You can't go into any, whether it's first world, third world, whether it's your backyard, and go in and expect to hand somebody the answers and for them to adopt it and it be correct. You have to go in and listen to them. Divine Chocolate was on the do not eat list because of child slavery in Africa, and just this week has been removed from the list, and they still source their chocolate from Africa, but they get it from Ghana, and they get it from this one farm. And what they're doing, they've gone in there and they said that the farmers know how to work the land. The farmers know how to run the farm, and they're just there to add assistance to help them, because they're working to get rid of forced labor and child slavery within the cow farms of this one farm. And Divine's not in there, and these organizations are not in there telling them how they should do it, that they need to do it this way and putting these mandates on them and demands on them. They're actually in there listening to them and letting them know how it works, and just trying to help them, guide them to keep the corruption out. And I think that's very important. You can't go into low income neighborhoods here in the States and tell them how to live. You can't go into any area, anywhere, it doesn't matter where it's at, and tell people how to live. You have to go in there and let them tell you how they live, and then help them, assist them to make it even a better place to live. And I think that's where we all fall, grassroots organizations, individuals, where we all fall short, because it gets overwhelming at times. It feels like we're not making anything, and we have all these great ideas, and it's frustrating, and it makes us sad, makes us angry when we see injustices and see this, that we do get caught up in our own thoughts and our own projections. But we gotta make sure we step away and realize that our ideas are not the only ideas. We all share the same goal to rid the oppression of whatever's wrong. And that we need, pretty much like what this show is doing, is trying to find those grounds that we can work with to be effective at getting rid of whatever problem we are faced. And
I think also, I think for people who want to engage, and maybe I'm misunderstanding her. I don't think it's just a matter of engaging just the local community, but you can't tell me that. I mean, we live in a globalized world. So you know what I do, I took this slavery footprint test, what I do affects people in other countries, like what I buy, how I live. Like, this isn't a matter of where the rest of the world is some mystical, spooky place out there, but I'm here in America. Like, I really have to stop doing that. This is a matter of, someone in Turkey is my neighbor as much as someone in Ghent. And I'm just as likely to have a friend in Turkey, Russia, Eastern Europe, wherever, as I am in the U.S., because the world is just that small. Like, in the end, I see wherever I go, the world is my neighbor. It's not just my community. The world is my neighbor. And honestly, I want to go where the needs are most pressing, and I want to help where the needs are most pressing, and I want to help my community, but you can't treat it as an either or. It's a balance. Like, okay, help in your local community, raise awareness, which I'm sure is also a waste somehow, although you'd be surprised how much awareness people actually need, and sometimes it sparks people to get involved. But whatever. I think you'd be surprised the needs in your own community. We have a whole homeless population in Ghent that suffers from mental illness. That suffers from mental illnesses because a lot of them are veterans. Like, yeah, help them and help the trafficked people in Thailand. It doesn't need to be either or.
Yeah.
And that's what's frustrating to me, is when false choices are given. Like really, I have to choose either one. Like, give money to an org or get involved in the community. Why don't I do both?
Yeah. No, it's true. And you don't even have to have friends in the other countries, because we are forced, whether we want to stay in our mind that we're not global, we are forced by corporations and governments to become global, because corporations are going into these underdeveloped countries and taking advantage of their resources, taking advantage of their lack of human rights. They're taking advantage of the people, the land, everything. And anytime that, whether you want to ignore it or not, anytime you make a purchase, whether it's for food, whether it's for technology, whether it's for clothing, anything right now in this house, in your home, has been forced you to take notice to other countries and people in your backyard, the whole range, because people are being taken advantage of because of the corporations and because of the capitalist system and all of that. And
it is sad driving through Honduras. I remember my youth pastor, when we took a trip there, was pointing at all the land and going, people could take care of themselves, farm, do whatever, but the corporations come in and they buy up all this land and people can't use it. And it's sad when...
And then they sell it back to...
Yeah. It's sad when people can't own their own country because an outside force comes in. That is sad.
It is.
Agreed.
So, I think we flogged that topic. So.
I think so, too. Get back. And
go ahead.
No, I was going to say, we could... I don't know if it's the halfway point. Obviously, we could end up talking about the Maslov issues.
Well, let's do the break, and then we'll come and talk about that, because I hate that.
Sorry, Beth. So I do want to, as far as the audiobook, I actually don't know if this is available on Audible. I think it is. Can we just edit that part out? It's on there. The book, we actually have two books. I know, Jason, you said that this one wasn't on Audible.
But you can just do that when I play.
But I figured I'd now, while this show is not necessarily an anti-faith or pro-faith show, we both we both definitely come from different streams of thought. In this case, I come from more of a certain Christian perspective, and Jason comes from a background of not. Atheism, like you said, doesn't define you. It's more of the anarchism and some of the ideas of individual justice, equality, and so forth. Just kidding. But one of the books I wanted to pick out for this week was a book by N.T. Wright called Surprised by Hope, Rethinking Heaven, the Resurrection, and the Mission of the Church. In this book, Wright deals with the view of Christians who say it's all about going to heaven when you die, so let's just let this world go to hell for all intents and purposes. And Wright saying, no, if we believe that the body is important, if we believe that the world matters to God and he wants to restore it, then that requires social engagement and activity now beyond the realm of things like proselytization and the usual evangelical staples. So Wright writes a theology of and a premise for church social engagement and mission in the church. So it's a good book. I think that'll be a good audible.com.
Awesome. And I have a book that is not on Audible. It's actually akpress.org, which is a very good social justice library. They focus on a lot of social justice movements and philosophies and everything. But the book that I want to introduce you, I've talked about this on my other podcast, The New Architects. There's a whole write-up on it on there if you want to go check it out on Zombie Popcorn. But if you don't, definitely check this out, akpress.org. It's called Dancing with Dynamite. It actually takes a look at the grassroots movement in Latin America, about social justice movements and how they've helped reclaim certain aspects of Latin America and given freedom back to the farmers. And you'll learn a lot of how corporations and government, especially in the U.S., oppress third world countries, especially in Central and South America. This book highlights it very well. So there are websites outside of akpress.org from that talks about this is towardfreedom.com and upsidedownworld.org that you can check out. Right now on akpress.org, you can get this book 50% off. They're doing a 4th of July special, so check it out. So, moving on.
Yeah. Go to audibletrial.com/zombiepopcorn for the free audiobook download. Sign up for the 30-day free trial.
Yay.
Yay. So all that was it. So let's talk Maslov. And I brought it up here. I brought up the pyramid on Maslov. And I want to point out, and I want to make a note here, that when we were talking about the Maslov issue, it was mainly dealing with how the Maslov hierarchy of needs relates to poverty, insofar as poverty relates to trafficking and the potential for trafficking and exploitation. In this case, I'm looking at the hierarchy of needs here, and starting off, the basic level of needs are...
Before you break into that pyramid,
yeah,
is my understanding that pyramid was never written in his writings. He never laid it out as a pyramid like that.
I can't speak for that because I'm not an expert on Maslov. But in terms of how it's conceived of now, it's in pyramid form.
I just wanted to see what the clarification was, where the transition be. But anyway, go ahead.
Right, and like I said, I'm not an expert on it, but when I look at the ideas here, I can't necessarily say that I see where Beth's coming from, because the basic needs are things like breathing, food, water, sex, sleep, homeostasis. I don't know what that is. Excretion. The basic human needs, being able to do those things. Now, in terms of does not having clean water create suffering and potential for exploitation? Lack of food, maybe? I'd have to say, that seems like a pretty basic thing. If those things aren't being met, it's probably going to affect people moving up the hierarchy of needs. And then the next one, and I think this is where you see the potential for exploitation more, security of body, employment, resources, morality, the family, health, and property. And so while maybe you could individually take apart certain ones of those, like the whole idea of the need for safety of body when your body is starving or thirsty or diseased and you want a better life, I have a hard time not seeing why that doesn't, why the lack of the basic physiological needs doesn't deal with the safety issue and thus cause someone to want a better life and make them exploitatable. I guess I'm having a hard time seeing why that's necessarily wrong, just as I look at the hierarchy.
Well, it's not necessarily wrong if you're going to break it down that way. What multiple levels that make it not as functional. Yeah, sure, you can. Well, first of all,
and the whole. I want to say too, dialoguing with ideas doesn't mean the full embrace of all parts of the idea.
No, totally.
But it's just saying, it's kind of like that. And that's, I think, basically how I see this is I can look at that and go, it's kind of like that.
But again, looking at something and saying, it's kind of like that, and when you're trying to address an issue, trying to find a solution to an issue, doesn't get you there. It may give you an avenue to describe it, but it doesn't give you an avenue to a solution. Using this pyramid, one, I've had several people say that they use this philosophy, this pyramid, in business to teach people how to take advantage of other people. And I guess there's not really much of an argument to saying, if it's mainly being used to take advantage of people, then I can see how you could use it to help free people. But the problem of it is it's what I said in the last episode. It's a philosophy that takes the outside world looking into a problem, saying that it's very egocentric. It's very
ethnocentric.
What did I say? Whatever.
I thought you said ego. You might have said ethno. I'm sorry.
It's all right.
Continue.
It may be Texas coming out.
Ethnocentric.
Yes. the problem is when you use a philosophy that creates an us and them scenario, and it goes back to what we were saying earlier, is you can't approach a problem, especially a problem of a different culture, and say, well, here's why you're being oppressed, and you have to do these to get out, to do this, because it on paper and in philosophy, sure, it works. But in real life, it doesn't, because it's like we were talking about earlier in the program on the different things. It's like you can't be just led to God and get the solution. You can't just saying, hey, you're being exploited because you don't have running water. We're going to give you running water, and there's a bigger aspect.
So reductionism is kind of the enemy we're trying to fight here, where we reduce it and make it more simple than it is.
Yeah.
Oh, I can appreciate that. No, that's a good point. And that's where I think, now, should we engage with things like I don't know how big you are into microloans or microfinancing, but the whole idea of creating opportunities, and maybe it's the American ideal, and maybe it's wrong to impose that on others, people having their own businesses, their own ability to sustain and make their own income, or dealing with those issues of employment, the safety issues, maybe still dealing with the food and
it depends. It depends how the employment's set up, because if you set it up in the current capitalistic system, the way we set up businesses and the way we set up workers and stuff, no, it's bad. We don't need to go in third world countries and teach them that model, because it's an oppressive model, and it only benefits the wealthy. It only benefits it doesn't benefit the workers. It benefits the higher ups.
I was going to say the employer.
What's that?
The employer.
Not really. The employer is even screwed on it. It's the higher ups. So we don't want to go in and give them a model, whether it's our capitalistic system or one that we think is better for them. We need to go in and see how they want their model to be done. What works for them? What works for their culture? What works for their society, their belief systems. I mean, it's look what we've done to Africa with the cacao. I mean, big money planted cacao there. Cacao does not grow there. Came in, created an industry, and said, "Look, we got a business model for you," and look how it's turned out. Sure, there are small people. It's now starting. On the most part, it's horrible, but there's small pockets of hope that are popping up, but it still has got years and decades to go before it even makes a dent in that world. And what did we do? We took our model and dropped it into their culture. And people always say, well, if you remove it now, if you boycott it and if you remove it and you get rid of the cacao in there, you're just going to make these children go become slaves of pineapples, whatever, be pineapple farmers or whatever. And it's a very short-sighted and naive way of looking at it. If we destroy the mechanisms that cause slavery within their culture and stuff, it shouldn't, and there's no way in hell that it should create another form of oppression. I can see how another form of oppression is to come in if the United States or some other government comes in and says, all right, we're seizing all the farms, we're seizing all the workers, everybody's going to jail. Because corruption
we're looking at you, Zimbabwe.
Yeah. Because corruption will just pick up and relocate. I mean, you look at crime anywhere. That's the way it works. But when you go in and work with the system and rehabilitate, not necessarily, that's the wrong word. But if you go in and work with them and help assist them to becoming a better culture, a better society, without trying to push our views onto them.
And I think that's a very good point. And I was actually thinking another one of my friends, actually the sister of the friend who I had this conversation with, her sister's a little bit more progressive, and her and I were talking. I asked her about the book The End of Poverty, which could maybe be one that we do. That one's at my office at Region. Otherwise, I might have brought that one. So with the end of poverty, one of the comments she made is that, the model the author used was very good, I think, in Eastern Europe. And her comment was, unfortunately, it doesn't work as well in some place like Africa. So I think you're right. There does need to be a more localized, enculturated form of safety, employment, development, whatever that looks like.
Well, that's how that's the only way that they're going to get their strength and their integrity to have the strength to become something more.
But unfortunately, I think it's almost like the big org thing. The economic systems are what we have, and in some ways, we could live for the ideal world where everyone does what they're supposed to and the grassroots can do it all. So same thing with the org thing, whether it's capitalism or whether it's some type of socialized democracy, or some type of shared wealth system, whatever that ends up being, at some point we're almost forced to work with what's there and not only try to improve what's there, but I think to bring in something entirely.
But that's what.
How's that?
But that's what's happening now. I mean, again, looking at the farms in Ghana.
I'm not supporting cacao and saying that or anything.
Just no. It's a good question.
Capitalism is an idea, or communism is an idea.
But both world, all three worlds, capitalistic, whatever, they all can work together, if integrity is built in. I mean, if you look at companies like Divine Chocolate, is a big corporation. It's a big chocolate manufacturer. It's a big multi-million dollars. Since they have integrity, since they have, and hopefully they don't prove me wrong, but anyway, at current state they have integrity and they are putting their values where their mouth is. They're walking the walk, and they are in Africa. And their philosophy is that, as we mentioned before, to work with the system, with the people there, to create a better farm, create a better way of life for the people, without telling them how to do it, where they do it themselves. And in return, since they are a big organization, a big corporation, they are giving money to those farms so they can expand and grow by buying their cacao, by knowing that their cacao is slave free and that it's done and it's fair trade. It's of the true sense, not which is a whole different story. But with that, you have best of both worlds. You have big United States, corporation working with small farms to improve their situations by not forcing them to do what the corporations want to do. And I think it's possible, and I think it can happen more and more. It's just we as citizens of this country have allowed governments and we've allowed corporations too much leadway. We trust them too much. We think if we were in that situation, we would do what's right. For some reason, it's like people project what they would do onto the corporations and the CEOs, and that's not what happens. It's just like for some reason there's a greed factor that sets in, and their only main concern is to make more money, to become more profitable. And if that's at the hands of some 9-year-old child in the field who cuts off his finger when he's harvesting, they don't care because they don't see it. And what we need to do as individuals, Christians or non, we need to hold these companies accountable. We need to put pressure on them. We need to be constantly on them, and we do need a boycott. And I know there's people who are against boycotts and find that they're not effective or find that they do more harm than good. But in where we live here in the States, that is what effective is, because the bottom line is that money talks to these corporations. And if we hurt their pocketbook, they'll listen. They'll have to. They'll have no other choice.
Which you brought up the issue of boycotts. We never talked about the effectiveness of petitioning. So, I mean, what's, in your experience, and I don't know, I don't want to get us off off topic and change, but I do want to talk about the issue of petitioning and what petitioning does, what it doesn't do. In your experience, how effective it's been?
It's gone both ways. I've done petitions. I've worked with big organizations. I've been employees of big organizations. They do focus on petitions, and I've seen them being highly effective. I mean, because companies do, like I said before, they do worry about their bottom line. They do worry about how much money they're going to lose when they receive the negative, the negative press, the negative attention. And for example, as you know, I work for an animal rights group, a national animal rights group.
That shall remain nameless.
Well,
I'm just kidding.
And a really good example of how well petitions can work. There was a company called Wet Seal. They slaughtered and tortured rabbits to make fur coats. They didn't do it. They bought rabbit fur, but these animals are skinned alive, fully conscious, and very inhumane situations. We started a petition. Within 2 days of that petition, they called the organization and said, "We'll stop. Stop your petition. We're removing this from our store." Because there were so many people outside. I mean, and you have to understand, it's like you said earlier, it's not this and only this. It's this and more. It's not helping, working in your community, or giving money to an organization. And the petitions are the same way. It's not just you signing your name to a petition and then forgetting about it. Well, it's about signing your name to that petition and then writing that company, calling that company, saying this is what's going on. I just signed this petition. This is why I signed this petition. I do not agree with this practice, and I'm not going to shop at your store until you change this practice. And it works. I've seen it work a lot.
And I have too, actually. I know of some CEOs who refuse to speak at certain organizations in conferences because of some stance that the conference has. I think there was one example of Howard Schultz. There was a petition on change.org, and he refused to speak at a conference because of something that the petition purported the conference believed, and so he refused to speak at the conference. And so in that sense, it does, right there we have some examples of where a petition changed their mind. Now, it's not going to be the end-all, be-all.
Oh, no, not at all.
But again, you can't just think, well, in an idealistic world, this method works best. Well, okay.
There's one thing.
Can you point me to that world? Can you point me to that world?
And that's the thing, is like within certain movements, all movements that I've ever experienced or seen from the outside looking in, all movements have their inbitings that they have. Well, this tactic is better than this tactic, and this tactic is better than this tactic, and they end up fighting amongst themselves instead of actually fighting the real issue. And I've always subscribed to the belief, if you're doing something, I don't care what it is, as long as you're doing something positive to help move the change forward. And whether that's you standing out in front of a store handing out leaflets, or holding a poster and talking to people as they enter or leave the store, or you're doing petitions, or you're doing phone calls, or you're doing direct action, you're doing civil disobedience, whatever it is, as long as you're doing something, that's the only way we're going to change things, and we need more people doing it.
Which kind of goes back to, as long as you do something, like start somewhere. Like if you haven't given money to anything, give some money. If you haven't ever signed a petition, sign a petition. Yeah. If you've never done at some point, like we said earlier, at some point along your activist route, like you're going to do some things better than others. You're going to be,
and there's going to be some things that are going to be more effective than others for that situation, and for another situation, it may just be the complete opposite.
Yeah.
So I mean, you just got to do something.
Please do.
So, where do we want to go with this? You want to talk about buying slaves?
Or do you we can't talk about like the issue of
actually,
where are we at in time?
We should be wrapping it up. Actually.
Because you had some comments too. Maybe we can talk about those at some point. I think we talked about the poverty is mindset and Maslov. I think there's some other stuff in there we could probably dish out of that concept, but I don't want to beat a horse that's been hit a lot.
Yeah.
Or about people willing to go back even after being fed. They need more than counseling, some mental illness, and how can they pay for medication by looking inward. That was
reference to Beth's comment of in the last episode saying that people when they're rescued from whatever bondage, whatever trafficking situation, that they end up going back to it
because they're addicted to drugs,
to whatever.
No alternate income.
And this commenter said that that they need more than counseling. Some need to have mental illness. Some have mental illness and they can't even pay for their medication. How is looking inward going to help them overcome that? And I think that we kind of talked about this a little bit at the first part of the show, but
yeah. And I don't want to be again. This is, I guess, my new favorite word. I don't want to be reductionistic. Like, you know how he solved that? Look inward. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's not that. Again, we're talking about ideas of like people feeling safe, fulfilled, and whatever that looks like for their culture or whatever. In this case, in terms of them needing more than counseling or paying for their medication, that's why you have places like IJM that have things like safe houses. Like, they prosecute the Johns, they rescue the victims, they get them the medical care, counseling. I mean, whatever they need.
But I think that's what it is, because even with that organization, she said that the statistics that she saw that she was stating said that they go back.
But that might just be more of the issue of trafficking in general. I don't know if other people have been more effective of rescuing people and keeping them from helping them overcome their drug addiction, helping them overcome their own personal brokenness. Because, I mean, you have the issue of like the breaking grounds in Eastern Europe where women are broken by just getting raped multiple times, and it creates a mental issue there. So in that sense, I mean, I don't know if there's someone doing it more effectively than IJM, helping medication counseling. That's great. Please point me in that direction. But again, I don't want to criticize someone because something they do, because people still have choices to make about, whether they go back. Even if you get someone all the help you can get them, there's still the potential they could go back. I would think that's with any recovery effort. There's always the potential for the individual to make choices to go back, or that they're so mentally broken that they do, or they're forced to, they're coerced, like whatever. I don't know all the issues of why. And also, in terms of looking inward, I see persons as holistic. Like, I'm not just a body, I'm not just a mind. As a Christian, it's not just about being spiritual. Like, I'm all these things in one. So people need not just their physical needs met, they need their spiritual needs met, they need their mental needs met, emotional needs, intellectual needs, physical needs. Like, people have all these holistic, and that's, again, it goes back to the grassroots individual. Like, these things are all holistic. Like, it doesn't exclude one by saying the other.
Yeah.
And you know what? Yeah, if you let one get out of whack from all the others, it's going to feel a little unhealthy. There's going to be something there that just feels like it's not being addressed. And because it's not, because you've allowed the balance to get tipped in some way.
Yeah. So the moral of this program is that you don't need to bring people to God. You don't need just to do one issue. You need to do a lot of issues. You need to work on it every day. How's that? You're like, no, I don't agree with that.
I think maybe the moral would be is that life and all these issues are filled with nuance, and there's a lot of collective dialoguing ideas. And I appreciate all the comments. I don't appreciate comments that are like, well, that's just wrong and this is the way, because it's like, you know what? In an ideal world, maybe that is the way, but I'm living in the world that's here. So those are, now we didn't talk about an action step.
Well, we got these books. Read these books. If you want the Christian perspective
on why mission is more than just waiting to go to heaven or personal conversion.
And if you want the grassroots non-Christian edition, get Dancing with Dynamite.
N.T. Wright's Dancing with Dynamite. Now, one thing we could put up, and I feel like every time I say things impromptuly, I feel Jason get a little nervous on the inside, like, what's about to be said?
I don't care.
No, call and response Did you watch the DVD, by the way?
Not yet. I haven't yet. I have it right here.
Call and Response, their website actually, in addition to the slavery footprint thing, if you go to Call and Response, and we can put up the website on the Webby Webs, you can actually, they have a bunch of action steps you can do. You can write your senators, your congresspeople, the president. There are places to donate to different causes. There's all sorts of, they lay out a lot of action steps you can take.
But they're all religious based.
No.
No?
Call and Response is a, I believe it's secular. I don't think it's a Christian org. Yeah.
Just want to clarify.
There are Christians involved, but I believe they're probably coalescing with other people. And
with that silly plug, I think we'll... Thanks for listening. Again, if you have any questions, comments, apparently you already know how to reach us because we received a lot, but always leave a comment on wherever you're watching this or listening to it. You can do it from Zombie Popcorn. You can there's a contact page there. You can even call us, leave us voicemails. We will play your voicemail during the show. Whatever you need, just let us know. Zombiepopcorn.com, contact page, phone number, email, comment section, everything.
So. Also, we also want to point out we are downloadable on iTunes. So if you think to yourselves, hey, I'd like to listen to this show, but I don't want to sit here at my computer and listen to it, you can download us.
And if you don't like downloading, you can get it from Stitcher.com, which is on demand. So you don't even have to download it. You just add the app to your phone, and anytime there's a new episode, it automatically pops in there.
Does that affect people's data plans?
Oh, I don't know.
Oh, okay.
None of my business.
Keep that in mind.
Have a good night.
Yep. Night.